as part of the Big Leap growth stories, where we brought to you the inside look at how ixigo's retention engines are running full steam ahead, and of course the results are there for all to see. But हर कहानी की एक शुरुआत जरूर होती है. तो Alok, let's start with the origin story. You are somewhere sitting in the south of France, a picturesque office, hopefully, at Amadeus. You're working late nights, and out comes an idea. Take us through the origin story of ixigo.
So, yeah, I mean, the south of France origin story is more like that late night, the next morning, my manager calls me and says, remember, this is France, we work only 35 hours in a week, so don't stay till 8 p.m. in office. But forced me to think that maybe I should be doing something else in my life. And at that point, I wasn't clear about what to start, when to start, but when you're confused, what do? You go to business school, right? Because that's where you're supposed to find all the answers. So I went to INSEAD for my business school, and during that year, something more interesting than the studies actually happened, which was I watched the movie Swades, and it sounds very poetic, but actually that movie forced me to think that what the hell am I doing outside of India?
So we're looking at Mohan Bhargav sitting here.
And in some way it resonated with the fact that, look, I'd spent 4 years in travel tech along with my co-founder. We both have similar backgrounds, went to IIT, worked for Amadeus. And the Indian travel market had just started to boom, right? There was Air Deccan coming in, and internet had just gotten started. There were like 10 to 12 million internet users here. And we just felt that, we should think about coming back here and doing something, right? Till at that moment of time, there was really no idea, nothing, right? It was just like, let's go back to India and build something. So we come back to India. We are both tier 2 boys. So I grew up in Kanpur, Allahabad, Lucknow, all these cities, and Rajneesh grew up in Patna, Betia, etc. So
ससुराल है हमारा.
कहाँ चालू करेंगे? Bangalore was like, even back then the traffic was super bad, right? So, and it just felt that Delhi/NCR would be the natural home to do something, and Gurgaon at that time was the most affordable place to actually rent an apartment and do something. We're talking about 2006.
Oh, the good old days when we could call Gurgaon affordable.
And so we rented an apartment here and started to toy around with multiple ideas, one of which was the idea of starting a travel website which allowed people to find where the best deals are, right? I mean, today you guys might be using sites like Kayak, Skyscanner, etc. But back then, 2007, when we launched, ixigo was the first meta search that allowed you to price compare and find where the best deals are on all the airline websites and OTAs. And it's funny, but when we started, we forgot to check our bank accounts before we started, because both of us were actually almost broke, right? Like, I had my MBA loan to pay off, and Rajneesh also had some personal loans and liabilities, and we had just a few lakhs of savings. So very quickly, we realized, start to kar liya hai, passion hai, enthu hai, all of that, but where's the money?
But you also, I don't think many people know here that you were once planning to join one of the big 4 consulting firms, right? If I'm not mistaken. उस time पे ऐसा लगा कि यार लगता है ये.
Yaar, B school mein everybody was sitting through these interviews, and I sat through a couple of them, and I got dinged by both the ones I wanted to join, and the feedback I got was I can't think straight. So I kind of gave up on that idea very quickly.
So I'll come to that. Thinking differently is one of the cornerstones of what Alok brings to the table on how ixigo's rise has happened so fast. But on that note, once you started it with Rajneesh, the question is, carving a niche in this highly competitive travel tech ecosystem, because at that point when you started, the seeds were already sown, and the market rapidly expanded, and the fact that OTAs have to complete, you started out as a meta search platform, then you evolved to a transactional platform, right? And at the same time, you're facing competition from other aggregators, bigger aggregators, plus your travel ecosystem is also evolving, where the airline provider or the bus provider is coming up with their own service. So carving a niche का क्या secret था आपका?
So I think, one thing that hasn't changed in the last 17, 18 years that we've been doing this is that we always think outside in, as in we always look at, okay, what is the customer struggling with? What's his pain area or her pain area? And how can we solve this? And we were always very bad at, again, doing the Excel and figuring out, can this make money, right? I mean, most of the products that we launched, on day one, we had no plan of how we would monetize them. Case in point, the meta search on flights, it took many months to sign up the first airline to start paying us. In 2012-13, we saw that mobile internet semblance of taking off was happening. Android had come in, and the new kind of internet users who were coming in looked completely different from the ones who had come in the first 15 million internet users who were largely flight bookers. And these were coming from tier 2, 3 towns. And that's the time when we started thinking like a consultant, going and checking the numbers. And we figured out at that time only 3% of India could actually fly. Anybody can guess what percentage of Indians fly today?
Anyone?
Sorry? Anybody else?
So we have got 10 and 25%.
4%. Hello. 4% of Indians fly. They fly multiple times a year. That's how you get to 150 million packs a year. So if you're building a flight first OTA, you touch 4% of Indians. And back then it was 3%. And when that insight dawned upon us that India के लिए travel site या travel app बना रहे हैं, तो हम train first ही बना सकते हैं. There is no other way to build it. This insight came in 2013-14 when we looked at the stats of the new internet users that had started to come in. None of them wanted to search for a flight. They all wanted to search for train-related information, and the kind of thing they were not able to search for was things like whether a waitlisted PNR would confirm or not, where is my platform, where is my seat going to be on a train, what does RLWL134 really mean, things like that, which, nobody was out there helping them with that, right? And then there were all these use cases like, like people would go on a train, they have to get off at 5 in the morning, they set an alarm for 4:50, and then 4:50 they wake up and then नीचे वाली बर्थ में झांक के पूछ रहे हैं कि कहाँ पहुंची, and then he's like, अभी तो सर 3 घंटे हैं, सो जाइए, right? So, and we traveled on trains and figured out that the most frequent use case was कहाँ पहुंची, because trains were always running late. And then nobody was there to wake you up before a station arrived. There were always time-based alarms on phones, which were useless in India, right? And then we started building these use cases, and by 2014-15, we had a utility app for train which had 0 bookings, but was growing with millions of downloads a year organically. We had 0 money to spend. In fact, first 5 years we'd raised very little money, so we didn't have much to spend anyways. But most of this was growing organically. People were telling each other about it, and just, one fine day we checked on Google Play Store that we were in the top 3 travel apps in the country, ahead of people who had raised like hundreds of millions of dollars, and we were like, okay, we are on to something. And that's the time, 2016-17, and we had built these AI-based use cases, right? Like we had the best PNR prediction engine, which we still believe we have, that can predict very accurately whether your PNR will confirm or not, or even the running status of a train using the location of other people who are using our app, right? So it's a crowdsourced running status, so that's always more accurate because somebody sitting in a train is actually telling you exactly where it is. And I think those things really took off to an extent where we said, hey, now we got all this traffic, we really need to start monetizing. This was 2017. So 9 to 10 years after we had started is when it dawned upon us that we have a lot of traffic, we better start monetizing it because we are running out of money, right? And that's the point where we raised a round from Peak 15, and we started more serious sort of attempts on monetization. Becoming transactional became that next big pivot. First on trains, and then on flights, and then on buses, and so we became an OTA. So I don't think we became an OTA like this, we sort of became an OTA like that. But we already had the traffic, we had the stickiness, we had the repeats, we had the engagement. So when we became an OTA, we became the fastest growing OTA, right? And then COVID arrived.
इनकी कहानी में बहुत सारे twist हैं. And considering that, I want to look at growth milestones as well, because at one point in time you had 6 apps, but as you mentioned, trains were the insights you dawned that this is the market you need to serve. So one is from transforming the next billion users ecosystem, which is trains, and of course transforming the 150 million, the first 150 million users, which is flights. So in this twists and turns that we have seen, 5 saal bootstrap tapasya aapke liye, then the funding comes in. Some 2 or 3 key growth milestones which have transformed you as a leader, your understanding of how your business should be run.
See, I think a lot of the growth can be attributed by placing the right bets very early, right? Because and I've been a growth hacker myself. Like I was the first growth guy at ixigo, and then now we have a big growth team. But the only thing I could do better was predict, what's going to take off. So I was very early on Facebook, Twitter, etc. Just trying to spread the word about ixigo, and then figured out, okay, videos is the next big thing, and then.
That reminds me, you guys had a viral video, right? वो hotel से क्या ले जा सकते हैं?
legally क्या ले जा सकते हैं? So I think 2015, 2016, we started doing content marketing before anybody knew what influencer marketing was. We were already like generating tons of videos every year and getting free eyeballs, virtually free, because most of those videos are shot in our office with green screens. Even the one shot inside a train, we have a train room in our office where we shoot them. So we have a room that looks like a train bogie. So a lot of that was done at a very low budget. I think just going back to what we did right was predict the trends right. Like not always, but we got that right many times, and we took early bets and benefited from that. I think growth hacking boils down to that, right? Like you spot the trends early, you ride them. By the time everybody starts riding the trend, it's time to get off that trend, because then it's too expensive or too commoditized, right? That's the only thing that we were good at.
But how do you stay fast then? I mean, as aapne kaha, your growth trajectory has not been like this. It's like this, right? So thinking differently, how do you, I mean, everyone knows that you should think differently, but how do you actually do it?
I think we never followed anyone's playbook. We were very bad. I mean, back to why I got dinged at consulting, but was very bad at following playbooks and
unstructured thinking.
And I think it goes in the team as well, because we ended up hiring a lot of people who were creative and who wanted freedom and all of that. And the fact that we don't even today, like I don't have a cabin in my office, right? And I hate that because I don't get to interact with people, right? So the fact is that you got to let people have freedom to say what they want to say. And the corollary is that you have to be super transparent with them, right? So it leads to these informal discussions, which always lead to some brainstorming that gets you ideas that you never thought existed, right? Structured thinking will never get you those ideas, right? I mean, a lot of it also comes from talking to customers. So the first thing I do every morning, and even my co-founder Rajneesh does every morning, is that we read all the 1-star reviews on Play Store for all our apps, right? It's a routine that, it's been so many years. Sometimes I reply to them. So when you see a reply, it might be me. But basically, that's something we enjoy doing, because unless we know the pain of the customer, we're not going to solve for what's broken out there, right? And I think sometimes those give you this crazy insight, which is like, hey, why did nobody think about this before, right? And then you go back to the drawing board and say, we need to rethink how we are thinking about the future, because this is a big pain area nobody has solved for.
That's actually one of the things which stuck in our earlier conversation that we had. The fact that you said that we are very focused in solving consumer pain points. The monetization will come later. We are not so razor focused on solving only if there's a monetization route, because there's always a benefit of an organic engagement with the customer. If the customer sees you as someone, as a brand, as an organization that is actively focused in solving their pain points.
See, our insight over the last decades is that innovation comes from solving problems that appear very low ROI on day one, but are faced by a large number of people, right? It might be something very, very, very tiny, which saves him 1 minute, but then there's like millions of people for whom you've saved that 1 minute. And because large companies won't bother to prioritize that, they won't solve for that, right? But if you're a small startup trying to compete, if you prioritize those things and you do it way better than anybody else, right? You will get the traction, right? And once you have the traction, monetizing, I mean, it's an easier problem to monetize once you have traction than the other way around.
So we've gone from Swades to 3 Idiots, saying, learning ki cha rakho, success tumhare piche aa jayegi. All right. Unstructured thinking sounds wonderful, but the problem is always going to be the challenges that come about, how do you deal with it? Because with linearity, with structured thinking, you have plans, you have a certain game awareness, you know that, okay, this is how we're going to solve. It's a process, there's no double thinking. But with unstructured thinking, where everyone is kind of free to think of their own solutions, how do you overcome challenges then?
Absolutely. So I think that's something that I've also gone through that learning curve, right? Because once things scale, you need to start bringing structure in, right? I think unstructured is great at coming up with 0 to 1 sort of ideas, and you play around with things and it works, it takes off. Now, when it takes off, that's when structured thinking about what to do next and how to build in that iterative growth is very important. And that's where, like tools like CleverTap, etc., become very, very handy, because you can't do all that possibly as a human yourself. Like there's so much data being thrown at you where you start sort of getting bogged down by the amount of data coming. I mean, we are talking about, in our case, last year we had 480 million annual active users. A sizable part of our population actually use our apps. There are towns where almost half the population of that town uses our apps, right? And it's gotten to a scale where you have billions of data points coming in every month, right? And it's not possible for any human being on the planet, no matter how smart that human being is, to analyze all that without using intelligent tools around them. So we've sort of invested in those tools very early. We were one of the first few customers of CleverTap.
Can you give us some use cases on how your engagement with CleverTap has helped you with user retention? Because we are in a whole growth versus profitability narrative right now, where profitability is in focus. So considering acquisition is 25 times more expensive than retention, how has your partnership with CleverTap helped you grow your revenues?
Absolutely. So I think 3 big areas, right, where right from day one, we found it very helpful. One is just understanding the entire customer journey, right? Which is, the customer discovers you someplace. It could be Google search, it could be Play Store, downloads your app, and then the whole onboarding experience, as in, does he actually try your primary use case? Is the person actually going to log in or not? Is that person actually going to do a search? Will he actually do a trained search? And then once he's done the search, why did they not convert? Understanding that entire behavior, not just quantitatively, but also through nudges, being able to influence that behavior, right? So just 2 or 3 examples I'll give you where these things are very important. And you're going to do it in a personalized manner. That's where, again, only a tool can help you, right? Because you got to send that nudge in a very, very personalized manner. So if I'm looking for a train ticket and all the trains are actually waitlisted, right? And I was doing the search for, let's say, 20 days out. And I've done that search day in and out. Like I've come back and done that 2 or 3 times, gone back without a booking. Now it's very obvious that the only way I can actually get to travel there is either I will come back on the day of Tatkal, and do that search again, or I will have to look at an alternate mode of transport, right? And if I look at the Tatkal use case, what that means is that you got to actually nudge that person right before the Tatkal window opens to say that, hey, today is the day where you got to try your luck for tomorrow, because you have been searching for this date for all this while, right? And you got to obviously try variants of various ways of copywriting, for that nudge. But ultimately, these tools allow you to do A/B testing, multivariate testing on all these things, and you end up then finding, what really works. And once it works, you scale that, right? And you apply it to more use cases. So that's one nudge, right? There's a bunch of onboarding activities you can enable, right? Where whether it's on your app landing screen, or if you want to, let's say, broadcast a message to a certain cohort of your users about some new offer or some new product feature that you've launched, these tools become very, very helpful, because you don't want to bombard all your users with it, but only that cohort where it's relevant and meaningful. And you can personalize it, so it could actually say, hey Gautam, have you checked out this new feature that we've launched, which allows you to track your, which allows you to know your check-in counter number, your gate number for the flight, and your baggage belt before you land, right? I mean, this is a real product. I mean, and we have then nudges. So if the moment you land, you get the notification saying your baggage belt number is 8, right? And just before you're approaching the airport, you get to know that, you need to check in at check-in counter number 12, and your boarding gate is 56, right? So these are things which you can enable in the journey based on where that person is in that journey, right? Only sophisticated tools like CleverTap allows you to sort of configure these things in your funnel at the right step with the various parameters, right, for your use case. So it's been very helpful to have that. And again, we run thousands of such sort of cases every day where automatically you're seeing the right notification at the right time for an informational notification. We're not trying to spam you with some offer in this, like we're just helping you in the journey. Your train is running late. We let you know.
Cross-sell opportunities bhi hai na? You missed your train. How about sit in the nearest Starbucks? Ya to chai pee lijiye.
Yeah, or take the next train or take the nearest bus, etc. And I think we've only scratched the surface, right? So the one thing is you have a tool, but how you use the tool, obviously over time we've evolved in how we've been using it, but there's just so much you can do in terms of improving retention, improving remarketing, and cross-sell. Cross-sell, upsell, definitely, is something that these tools enable.
Indeed, we have just scratched the surface, especially when it comes to tapping the next billion users in this travel tech ecosystem, and the fact that ixigo has done so much in so little a time with, of course, effective partners like CleverTap is testament to the fact that you can balance profitability and growth, and at the end of the day, make sure you're solving the right problems for the customer. I know we called it a fireside chat, but this has been more like a metro ride. If you know your Mumbai journey, it's a ride between Warsaw to Ghatkopar. So we've covered 6 destinations, 6 or 7 points, 6 or 7 stations. Before we get off this train of thought, maybe we'll toss over to the audience and see if you have a question or two to Alok. You won't get this opportunity every day, so make the most of it. We'll take at the max 1 or 2. So if anyone has a question for Alok on ixigo's growth journey, or maybe from your own experience, any doubts that you have as you're running a startup. Yes, sir. We'll give you a mic. You can introduce yourself and then ask a question to Alok. There you go. The mic is behind you. Please go ahead.
Hi, good evening. I'm Shreyas. The 3 of us are from MMTC PAM. The question is the problem that we guys are facing. We are a very premium, positioned as a very premium brand. We don't do great on margins because we are a bullion, we do gold, silver, right? So the question to you was that we are, from an e-commerce or a digital business perspective, we do great on B2B and on the retail side. But we're really struggling to, grow, on the digital side of things. There are, I want to sound as positive as possible. The leadership has hopes on us. Our leadership has hopes on us, but they are not, the belief is not kind of sinking in.
Sharmaiye mat, it's a closed door session. Your leadership is not sitting here.
So they'll only put it on YouTube.
Help me with the job in that case. So what typically happens is, I'm sure even for you when you started out, you had a really small base, right? You had limited, scope in terms of reach using tools like CleverTap. So how do we consider us a startup? From that perspective, how do we grow? What are the
classical problem, chicken and egg problem, right? Like how do you grow from zero to hero, right? So and it took us a while. So don't use our playbook because it took us very long time to grow. These days people want to grow this fast in 5 years. But I'll give you a simple mantra, right? I think it's great that your focus is not on growing with discounts. Trust me, it doesn't work. It works temporarily, but you don't want those kind of people, at least for a premium product, right? You will have to invest in great content marketing, right? Like you will have to create aspirational reasons for people to talk about your brand or your products. Now, those could be functional reasons, but you have to go beyond just functional and create some talking points, which could be inducing laughter, which could be inducing, I don't know what your product is, honestly, I'm just giving you very high level advice, but
gold coins.
I think looking at gold prices, laughter gets induced on its own. It's out of reach.
But you want to be in conversations, right? And do whatever, like product-wise, marketing-wise, do whatever it takes to get into conversations. Because then you're not an ad anymore. You're someone talking about your brand surreptitiously, like among friends, that, hey, did you check out what these guys did, right? That's the only thing that, like in the early days, we didn't have a lot of funding. Like we were competing with people spending 10 times as much funding as we had, they were spending in like a quarter, right? So it was looking like an impossible space to be in. Logically, we shouldn't have been around, but all we did right was identified a few hooks, whether they were product hooks or marketing hooks or talking points, where we remained relevant, right? I mean, it's all about just remaining relevant. And to remain relevant, sometimes you have to reinvent yourself as well. Like our whole pivot to trains, pivot to mobile first, this was all an attempt to remain relevant, right? Because a lot of success is just about lasting that long. So try to do more of what makes you more relevant in conversations and content marketing. And retention is something you should focus on because you have a very small pool of niche customers. Don't lose them. Keep growing them.
Absolutely, and you can check Agla Station Mars, which was also a campaign which ixigo did as a reference point on organic conversations. But unfortunately, well, we have reached our destination when it comes to this train ride of thoughts with Alok. Thank you so much, Alok. And on that note, I hand it back over.
We actually can take one more question if you'd want to. We have
really?
One more question.
All right.
Yes.
Sure.
How about one more question?
Yes, at the back.
Yes, sir, at the back. We need some more lights on.
Hi, I'm Vinayak from Lazy Gardener.
Yes, sir.
So Alok, basically I wanted to ask always this discussion about should we unify all customers at one place, or as you have done for flights, hotel, everything has been segregated at app level also. And I'm not sure, but last I checked, I think you don't even do cross login. Once I'm logged into one, it doesn't automatically does. So what are the advantages or disadvantages of having segregated product or one unified product?
So we've started doing some of that cross login or single sign-on thing. I mean, it's progressing, but just coming to why we have multiple apps, and we get asked this a lot. Going back to that 4% thing, right? Like, जो बंदा इटावा से आ रहा है ना, उसको इंदौर जाने का रास्ता चाहिए, मॉलडीव्स नहीं देखना है होम स्क्रीन पे, और उसको मैं सेम ऐप नहीं दे सकता, right? And this is something that, when you talk to customers, you get that insight. Why they prefer your app over somebody else's is because you're giving them the most relevant things up front, right? And it helps you become laser sharp in marketing because the guy who travels 80% of the time on trains wants the best train app on their phone, period. They don't care about anything else. The guy who travels every weekend, the student who's taking a bus back to his hometown every weekend wants the best bus travel app on their phone, period. Now, the interesting thing is each of our apps also has cross-selling and upselling for all the other verticals. So if you have the best train app on your phone, what the user doesn't know is he already has the best travel app on their phone. But over their journey, he or she will discover it because one fine day, there might not be a train connecting that route, but a bus, or all the trains are sold out and the flight is the only way to go, and so on and so forth, right? So there are avenues to discover other verticals in every app. But I believe that fundamentally, the NBU world and the FHM world, as I call it, the first 100 million user world, fundamentally these are two very different worlds. And I grew up in so-called NBU, so I understand what that difference is, but you have to localize, you have to make the app lightweight. There's so much you can do to tap into the tier 2, 3 markets, which a tier 1 user doesn't care. I mean, you give them the best features and a 100 MB app, they'll download it, right? Tier 2 user, more than 20 MB, might not just download it. It's too big, right? And it's very, very different way of thinking. So that's the reason why we did it. Having said that, most of the large OTAs in the world have multiple apps and multiple brands, if you think about it.
But I like the fact that you have a certain finesse when you're dealing with customers. As you mentioned, you're keeping it simple in the context of what your customer is actually doing. As you said, agar mujhe Indore jana hai, I'm not going to be searching for Maldives, but I will give you the best options for your localized travel needs and not try to do everything and anything, but keep it razor sharp and focused in delivering that customer's pain point and bringing out the solution. On that note, as I mentioned at the start, that the currency of this conversation, this engagement will be claps. It's time to see how much have we actually engaged with our customers. Thank you so much.